What if your team's smartest new hire doesn't sleep, never ask for the coffee, and still needs you to lead with more heart than ever? Today, we explore AI that augments, not replaces the human brilliance. So, if you have ever wondered how to stay deeply human while getting radically strategic, then you are in the right place. So, welcome back, dear listeners, to AI-Biz, the podcast where better minds build better worlds. I'm your host, Avik, and today we are decoding the future of work, not as a kind of dystopian headline, but as a human playbook. And my guest today, please welcome Carlee Wolfe. So, welcome to the show, Carlee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing, amazing. So, dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion, uh, we'll quickly introduce you with Carlee. So, Carlee has steered culture and transformation across global brands and the Olympic programs. So, her secret: simple frameworks, rigorously applied, clarity, confidence, curiosity, plus information, support, and encouragement. Yeah. So, Carly believes that the transformation doesn't have to be complicated, just consistent, compassionate, and clear. So, wait. Let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the introduction and just by extension, in terms of my background about very passionate about. We're talking about AI today. So as you can imagine, with my background, just really passionate about workforce and workplace and how much is changing in those worlds. And so we'll talk about this today, but certainly in the workforce category, how are we thinking about like the future of work in both the speed and value realization, but making sure we're marrying that with a lot of care and support of folks in our organizations as well as our communities. And that's also a big part of what I do in my I'll say like my personal life, like work personal life.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to be here with you today to chat further and explore.
Definitely, definitely. So, Carly, when leaders ask, what's the real and what's hype with AI right now? So, where do you tell them to look first, and what do you tell them to ignore also, if you can share?
Sure. I mean, it's an interesting point of where we're at on the AI journey. I was actually just at a conference yesterday with combined industry leaders, and we were talking about this very question. And not just from the workshop yesterday, but as I talked to leaders in my own organization, work and connect with leaders in my community, which for me is Baltimore, Maryland, and just in general, I think we're on a wide spectrum of the AI journey. Everything from I don't wanna use AI, I don't use AI, but, I hate to be the spoiler alert here, everybody is actually using AI whether they, know it or not. This is the part that has been embedded either in our work or our daily lives for a number of years. And I'll just use
Yeah.
an easy example. If you're using Google Search at all today, there is a generative component of that. So just to kinda to play on that, but all the way then to communities and organizations experimenting with generative AI tools, something like ChatGPT, to
Mm.
what tools and resources can they be using to advance work and make things potentially easier. And then you're kind of looking on the bleeding edge of folks, organizations, communities building AI, whether it's bots, resourcing, generative tools to serve custom needs. So if you think about, for example, like running your own business, can I have an AI assistant help me run on the background to keep up some of my tasks and my calendar? So the question that you asked was like, where are we at? And I think it just really depends on your personal journey, your organization's journey.
Mm.
But it's important to acknowledge that this is one of those changes that for sure is not going away. It's just it's been a steady increase of exposure and impact, and I think we're only ramping up now. It is now in the hands of the consumer and where we can drive it personally and be a consumer and customer of. And so where I always encourage people, we're talking about this balance of execution and care. I think I'll start with like giving care to yourself. Like one, recognizing that these are big changes, but I also think it's important to get involved. because we are going to continue to change, and it's important to that that folks build their skill sets. They kind of understand the impact of the things around them. And so that would be my maybe we're early journey. My first encouragement for folks is to get in the conversation. And I know we're going to break down the latter end of the spectrum, which is folks that are more involved. But yeah, that's where we're at. In this like beautiful, scary gray area transformation that we're all in the middle of.
Mhm. Exactly. And I mean, if a manager has zero budget but
Yeah.
wants immediate traction, what's the one low lift, like the high signal experiment they can run this week? What do you say?
Mm. Good question, because I think budget's also relative, right? Like, is the organization, maybe the manager doesn't have budget, but in the organization they have access to AI tools. But let me go with just something that I do know is absolutely free, which is Google. How can people begin as a manager? I think the manager plays a role in maybe two ways. One is how do they maybe even begin to have the conversation around AI transformation and start to
And
welcoming in the dialogue around building new skills, around being, I'll use the term AI curious, because I think we're in a time where people are really also afraid and scared, thinking about AI taking over their jobs. And so I think managers can begin there, begin to extend care and support in just having the dialogue around change. And you mentioned earlier one of my frameworks is a change framework. It's around managers providing information, support, and encouragement. And I think maybe leaning on something like that, what information can they share or that the team can share with one another about the change? How can they provide one another support? Like, hey, I learned this thing today. I'm going to show you. And encouragement, right? Finding those wins, providing recognition, all that, all folded into where can we begin? I think the other is then from the tooling. To your point, without budget, I think that can be tough. But I'll go back again to that Google example, which is how are you using search and generative mindset to leverage that tool differently? So, are you looking for imagery? Are you looking for depth of research, different sources? Insights, how can you expand beyond the traditional, "Hey, help me, um, find an article about" I'm making it up, a project management building a project management plan. Go further, "I'm building a project management plan for multiple divisions. We have a budget of $1,000,000. I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it," right? I'm just giving a prompting example, but that's I think where folks can begin. One, the leadership and management part, how are you engaging with your teams? And two, what free tools do you have access to, and how can you start using AI skills or mindsets to explore and maximize those types of resourcing?
Yeah, exactly. And okay, and like what to say? Like, first of all, definitely I would say that what I'm hearing is like start small, start visible, and I really love that the information that clarifies, support to try, and also encouragement to iterate. That's definitely the three essential in motion without the corporate fanfare. But um, where do you see the leaders over indexing, like either getting too sentimental about the human touch or uh, too mechanical about the AI stack also? So how do you calibrate that? I mean, yeah.
Mm. It's a good question. Maybe I'll answer it in two ways. So one, there's the manager that perhaps doesn't have influence or a large amount of influence over the types of teams or tools and resources that their team has access to. And so perhaps over-indexing could be maybe a non-traditional answer, which is not actually going with the change themselves, like over-indexing into old ways of working. I think we're in a time it's important to be stepping out and saying, "How do I lead differently? How do we maximize our work differently? How can we be learning new skills differently?" And so in one way, we're calling upon some traditional ways of leading, which is helping in development. In other ways, it's highlighting or encouraging leaders to learn out loud and go through the change together. So maybe I'm flipping the question on that particular one. From a tooling perspective, maybe over indexing would be assuming that your colleagues have actually the skill sets to use the AI tools in front of them and pushing them without support to kind of build up that skill set or confidence, or overusing the tool or over assuming that the tool can replace sort of that like human touch and innovative thinking and perspective that folks can bring to the table. And by the way, I think that comment is exactly what people are worried about. And I think can be at this stage a scary proposition of over assuming, because there is still, at least like in many tools, opportunity for AI to still learn. Now it's, as we sit here today, much smarter than it was 3 months ago, 6 months ago, etc. But still to over assume that it can do more than what you know it to, I think is something for managers to watch out.
Lovely. So, like, can you offer a two-part kind of script for the managers, like one line that signals care and one line that signals standards, that rolling out AI to a kind of nervous team.
Um, I sure, I think so. On one hand, you asked about rolling out to a nervous team. I think
Yeah.
it's extending the understanding of or extending empathy and kind of understanding, well, what is that fear and uncertainty that's going on? And I imagine a lot of it's like,
Mm,
will AI replace me? I don't know what this is. Will I be good at it? I hear a lot about where my data is going. How are they protecting the data? Right. I mean, naming some, I think, common examples, but I think it starts with that manager asking the question, right? Like, where are we? Where do we have our concerns? And where can I support you? Where can our team support one another? I think that that's a place that they can start. And then on the flip side, I think you're asking me maybe more on the AI ready folks
yes.
is like, how do you tap into where they're at? I think, in traditional tech terms, we use these things like super users. Maybe it's, I don't know, AI, maybe it's AI champion, or I'm just trying to think out the cup of,
Mm,
we need a new name there. But I think it's how do you tap into then their excitement, their skill set, their knowledge to maybe bring that into the team to push and gain greater depth and traction of how you're using tools that you have access to. So I think that that's how you can work it. Can you think about AI mentorship? Right? These are all the questions of, by the way, I think on both ends, some really basic and important leadership skills that leaders should be can be leaning into. This
mm,
is back in the day, they would call this situational leadership. Where are you meeting your people where they are, and how do you provide them the support based on, where they're at in the spectrum of being able to perform and have confidence in their role. I think AI is a piece of that, and by the way, a very big piece of that today, both in
mm.
how much you're using it, but certainly the sentiment that sits around all of us.
Exactly. Exactly true. Yeah. I mean, it's a kind of compassion with a kind of spine, sorry, and which is the heart-forward language that is paired with the crisp expectations, and also that helps people feel safe and accountable while also the tools evolve. So yeah, and AI.
Absolutely, and I mean, I'm curious to you chat with a lot of folks, and
Mm,
I'm sure have a personal perspective. Like, where are you kind of hearing from folks, or where are you maybe seeing some of those early indicators of maybe folks being able to find that balance for themselves?
mm, no, definitely, it's definitely true, and like what I was also saying, like I'd love to talk about some of the kind of challenge angle. Like some people also argue that AI will definitely create more jobs than it destroys, while others say that that's cold comfort if your current role is evaporating. So, what is the honest and the skills based path for an individual who feels at risk right now? What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just still so much to be figuring out. I think
Hmm.
in many ways it would be an underestimate to say that folks' jobs aren't changing at all. And so I think you asked a very good question, which is like the skills that we can be obtaining and thinking about. And I go back to like I think about like starting a job and I like come into maybe a new industry, a new position, and I'm onboarding. I'm, consuming information. I'm curious about what's around me. I'm chatting with other folks. Like at least I think that that's what you encourage, folks to do early on. And so maybe how can you apply some of that early? I'll use underscore the term curiosity around
Hmm.
getting in the conversation. Where are you at on in your career? as you think about evolving in your role and in your organization, or maybe it's in your own business, what are the things that you want to continue to learn? And where can maybe this next simple question is just where can AI help you with that? Where can AI augment or provide additional value to you? So I think it's understanding where you're at and being kind to yourself, right? Meeting yourself where you are. But I go with the curiosity piece because I think that's an easy place to just start asking questions. And it's a place that we can ask and answer for ourselves and our frame of going through change. So I would go there, and I think that would be an easy place to start. I think another place to start is if you wanna go here, which is in your career path, are you doing research on where thought leaders, um, vendors, partners, where they're adding thought leadership in the space of where the role may change? So, for example, like, I work in HR. I also, work in coaching and hospitality. Like, I followed a number of different folks who are having this conversation, and I'm learning from them as they're exploring as well. And
Yeah,
I'd encourage, folks to do the same, and I think that's another, easy point of entry.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And okay, and if suppose you were designing a 30-day micro upskill sprint for a kind of frontline contributor, what would the week 1 through week 4 actually look like?
Oh, this is both a good question and a complicated question because I think it really depends on the role. I well, one, how are you maybe using your generative AI tools to help you build this? I think that maybe in the spirit of our learning and where do people begin, I think this is a great place to maybe provide an example of where you can start. But I think maybe it's a month long boot camp is a marriage of things that we've been talking about today. One, what is AI? How do we build some comfort around that? Where do I sit in the AI journey, both as a human and as potentially a leader? So perhaps there's a sort of like first self-discovery and confidence gaining or growing segment. I think the next part is where are you at in your role and where can AI provide some augmentation, support, or efficiencies that you might want to explore. In other words, you still have to learn how to use those tools. um, so that would be another key learning. I think language and mindsets in AI is important. So we've in this call talked about a few generative tools like ChatGPT and Google. There's a way to really maximize the prompting that you're working through and building on the back end your GPTs or how you're gaining information. So I think learning the language and the mindset of operating in AI, I think would be another chapter. And perhaps then how are you we'll call it, maybe we'll call it going deeper, right? Where are you maybe building things on your own? For example, in ChatGPT, you can build GPTs, right? Actually, or sort of like look at personas or bots. Like, can you go
Hmm.
further and start to take a step there? Or are you using things like, let's look at, how you're doing your daily tasks. Can you find a repetitive task and you ask yourself, is there a way I can, augment this with AI and how do I go about doing that? So, that might be depending on where folks are at, maybe more of a curiosity play or a continuation of AI language and mindsets. But I do think getting hands on keyboard or
Hmm.
voice to voice, maybe if you will, is a place to begin. So those would be I'm just spitballing with you some things to think about. I don't know, what would you add? Maybe if you had the bonus track of that program, what would be your final course there?
Understood. Understood. And also, like, suppose many organizations like they want AI wins yesterday, and where should the leaders draw the line? I mean, what's a principled no, quote unquote no, even if the ROI looks tempting? What do you have to say?
Well, we've chatted a lot about readiness, and I think it's important to understand where folks are at and help them to help bring them along. N-
Hmm.
we're not just talking about AI here; we're talking about leadership,
Hmm.
and I think it's important in transformation and change and where we're headed to keep some of those principles alive. So one, I'd say where are we at with readiness, and not to say that we should um
Hmm.
only be recognizing like, hey, people are ready and therefore now we're doing anything. I think it's the continuation of where we've been. Like, how do you then break down, like, what's the concern and how do you support people through that? So I think it's starting there and, providing support along the journey, absolutely.
Hmm, amazing. So, if you have to give one advice to the listeners today, what that will be?
I think continue to balance, in this stage, I think, you know, the world is, I mean, I use this term again, like, learning out loud.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if we name it that enough, which is that we're at a unique time. I think everyone's figuring it out. Even the experts, while they are experts, we still don't know wholly what this will drive and facilitate in the future, right? We have some guesses, we have some thoughts, and certainly there are folks that are out there that are smarter along that spectrum than others. But I think it is also still important to recognize that we are learning in so many ways, and so
Hmm.
to encourage the learning, to learn out loud and to be curious. That's the other thing I'm gonna underscore, which is be curious. Be curious about what's possible, be curious about where you can learn, and be curious on your team where you can add these like wonderful capabilities, and then be curious about um your leadership journey and where you can develop as a human. So I know that that's maybe one larger piece of advice nested with many nuggets, but
Hmm.
yeah, stay curious and continue to learn out loud as we go through this together.
Lovely, lovely. Great. So, Kali, thank you so much for proving that the future of work is not a kind of tug of war between the circuits and the soul. So, it's a kind of choreography, right? So, for all the listeners, pick one action this week. So, clarity, support, and encouragement. So, for clarity, name a single workflow where AI could assist, not just replace. And in terms of support, book a 20 minutes micro demo with your team, agree on some success metrics, and in terms of encouragement, celebrate one learning, especially a useful failure, right? So, if today's episode sparked value, then please follow Carly, share this episode with a leader who cares, and leave us a review. It helps the show reach more uh, and more humans who are building human systems, right? So, Carly, if someone wants to connect with you, what would be the great medium to connect?
Yeah, perfect. They can find me on LinkedIn, just Carlee Wolfe, and I'm always happy to take messages if people want to have a conversation. I also do post a lot about this topic, and so happy for there to also be followers.
Amazing, amazing. Lovely. So, dear listeners, I'll put all the links into the show notes for your easy reference. And with this hope, I am your host, Avik, and this is AIBiz. And until next time, lead with heart, design with strategy, and let curiosity do the heavy lifting. So, thank you so much.